Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is D back again with MKD58 Media, and I've got another movie review for you guys. And this movie review is going to be for the 1986 sci-fi horror film The Fly. All right, now The Fly is directed by David Cronenberg, and it is starring Jeff Goldblum and Geena Davis. And I also want to make sure to mention that it is a remake of a B movie that came out in like the 50s or 60s. But the real simplified kind of explanation of this plot, which the plot is already pretty simple. Jeff Goldblum plays Seth Brundle, who is a scientist who has been working on a teleportation machine. What it is you get in one pod and hopefully teleport to another pod that's also in the same room. He's been working on this machine. It still has some kinks that he needs to work out. You know, he's testing it out on inanimate objects as well as things like baboons and monkeys to varying results. So at one point he finally decides to test it out on himself, and a fly gets into the pod with him when he starts to go through the process, and he is able to successfully teleport to the other pod, but that fly was in there with him when he started the process, and the fly's cells start to mix in and kind of take over slowly Seth Brundle's body, and he starts to go through some dramatic changes that ends up in some kind of horrifying results. Geena Davis plays a woman that in the beginning of the movie he's just kind of getting to know her, but they eventually develop a relationship and strong feelings for each other. And she's a journalist for a scientific magazine called Particle Magazine, and so she becomes kind of involved with him more through the guise of wanting to get some sort of scientific news scoop, so she can write an article and things like that. But she begins to, you know, he tells her about the teleportation machine, shows her some things. Actually, at one point early on, tests it out on one of her stockings and successfully is able to teleport it to the other machine. So that obviously blows her mind. So now she's really kind of wrapped up into this whole thing, and they start to fall for each other. So she's fascinated by the man and the romantic stuff, and she's also fascinated by the science of everything that's going on. So that's just a little simplified thing about the plot. I won't go into details about some of the specific dynamics and things that happen. Geena Davis has a ex-husband or ex-boyfriend that's also her boss at this particular publication she works at, so there's complications there, things happen. But I won't go into all that because I want you to check the movie out for yourself, because if you have not seen this movie, it is definitely worth a watch. I saw this movie in the past a long time ago, and I'm pretty sure the version I saw was like an edited, like Sci-Fi TV, the cable channel Sci-Fi edited version or something like that. So, and even the edited television version, depending on, you know, where you watch it at, is pretty gory, still pretty gross. But I finally decided to go back and give this movie a rewatch the way it was really meant to be seen, in its unedited theatrical R-rated version. And so my thoughts about this movie, obviously you can tell by now, I like this film. I think it's a really well-made film, very interesting. Obviously, if you've seen this movie or have heard about it, you know there's a lot of body horror stuff going on, a lot of practical effects type stuff going on, and you know I'm a sucker for the practical effects. Jeff Goldblum gives a great performance. I always think of him, as a lot of people probably do, I always think of Jeff Goldblum as Ian Malcolm. So it was interesting seeing him in this role. And coincidentally, I discovered that he's in like Death Wish 2 or something, and he actually plays like a rapist and a criminal and all this other stuff in Death Wish 2. So it was weird seeing him as that kind of guy in a movie, but that's neither here nor there. Anyways, back to The Fly. So Jeff Goldblum gives a great performance. I want to say this might be, I won't say this is my favorite performance from him, but it might be his most impressive for me, just in terms of acting and things like that. My favorite character that he's played is probably still Ian Malcolm from the first Jurassic Park, and even in Lost World I liked him in that as well. But so Ian Malcolm is probably my favorite role of his, but I feel like this role in The Fly is his most impressive performance in terms of what he has to do, because he is the centerpiece of the film, whereas in a lot of other movies he's one of an ensemble, one of the people in the film, one member of a team and things like that. He is the centerpiece of the film here. He does a great job. He actually it's another case of a guy playing a role where I can't picture somebody else playing that role. Now obviously there's other actors that could, maybe if they had did it and we never had known Jeff Goldblum was up for the role or something like that, maybe we would have bought into somebody else playing that role. But now that I've seen Jeff Goldblum in that role, it's hard to imagine anybody else being able to pull off what he did with the role, okay? So great performance from him. Just his quirkiness, his weirdness, the way he handles himself really makes him, he's very believable as a scientist. I mean, you can see, you translate this movie, The Fly, to the very first Jurassic Park, it's easy to see kind of why they would want him for the role of Ian Malcolm, because he looks like a guy that enjoys explaining things to somebody else, and all science and creation and all that type of stuff. So great performance from Jeff Goldblum. Geena Davis, she gave a good performance. This kind of brought back memories, because I remember when Geena Davis was a lot more active, and so it was kind of I don't know, pleasant, I guess, to kind of be reintroduced to her again, because I haven't really seen her a lot lately, and I'm sure she's probably been doing stuff, but I haven't seen it. So and she does a great job. Her performance is very believable. I buy into it. Her kind of the emotions, the range of emotions that she has to go through in this situation, from going to just meeting this guy that's just a stranger, that's just kind of trying to pick her up and bring her back to the crib, so to speak, and how that advances to an actual, she kind of is using him a little bit for his scientific information and to get a scoop, and then she starts to fall for him, and then she really falls for him, and then she has to witness him go through this tragedy, and which is, hurts her. And then she has to deal with him kind of pushing her away because of what he's going through. And now she's very kind of distraught, and just the whole range of emotions she has to go through. She gives a great performance. Big positives about this movie. I think I kind of touched on it when I said the practical effects. Great practical effects. Excellent body horror. This is definitely a movie you don't want to eat while you're watching it. This is not you don't want to go to Wingstop and then try to enjoy your meal while this movie is playing. This is not a movie for dining. There's some gory stuff in this. None of it was too surprising though for me, because like I said, I have seen this movie before, so none of it was too shocking. I don't know how to deal with the spoiler aspect of this film, because I don't know if I talk about certain things, does that qualify as a spoiler? If I tell you, a certain body part fell off, is that a spoiler if you haven't seen this movie? Should I let you see that on your own? You know what I mean? So you get the full reaction and shock of certain body parts falling off, and this happening, and this, blowing up, and this getting destroyed. And, so I don't know what to do there. So I won't go into specifics about actual gory scenes and physically what is happening and things like that. I'll let you, for those that haven't seen this movie, I'll let you discover that stuff on your own. Let me get to my score, because otherwise, if I'm not going to talk about the stuff that actually has happened in the movie, there's not too much more for me to talk about. So my score for this movie, I'm actually going to have to go 8 out of 10 for The Fly, and I actually possibly could go a little higher on that. It's if somebody gives this a 9 out of 10, I completely understand that. There's really no true flaws with this movie, at least for me. There's narrative things that maybe, depending on your kind of taste, you might have an issue with. One thing that I will say is the movie starts kind of abruptly in a way, in that when we start the movie, when we enter into the film, Geena Davis and Seth Brundle, or Geena Davis and Jeff Goldblum's character, are already in a conversation at a party, and they've already been introduced. Like, if I remember correctly, we get introduced to them after he's already most likely said, "Hi, my name is Seth. What's your name?" Da 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 da. Once we enter into the film, they're already in the middle of a conversation. So it was kind of a weird spot to kind of enter the story at for me, because usually a lot of times you at the very least get to see the introduction. You get to see the person saying, "Hi, my name is da 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 da." So this was that was kind of interesting, but it didn't throw anything off. It wasn't really a negative, because anybody that has common sense and has experienced life can kind of pick up what's happening and go along for the ride at that point. You don't need to see the very first meeting or the very first words that they say to each other and things like that. So I didn't really mind that, but it is, from a narrative perspective, it is kind of unorthodox. At least for me, in some of the movies I've seen, it was kind of unorthodox, but I didn't mind it at all. Other than that, yeah, there's no acting is all there. Practical special effects, all there. The musical score is there. There is a moment where he's first starting to go through the changes, and they're really kind of subtle, but if you've been paying attention, you can catch them. Like, the first change is the first physical change that you start to notice is his skin, the skin on his face, his complexion, I should say, is a little bit, it starts to be like, he starts to start seeming like maybe he has a developing some kind of acne issues, but it's very subtle. You know what I mean? Like, I could see how, like, people just in his life would maybe see him and maybe wouldn't right away think something was wrong with him. They might just be like, "Oh, he's having a bad skin day," or something like that. It starts off real subtle, but the viewer can notice it very quickly because it's his face, it's his skin complexion. He starts to get very aggressive and fidgety and just antsy, so to speak, and he takes off into the night. He gets mad at Gina Davis, who's at his apartment, and he starts to get on his clothes. He puts on a jacket. He puts on a members only style jacket and doesn't have any shirt on underneath, not even a wife beater. He's just bare chest, and then puts a jacket on over that, has pants on and all that stuff, and then just takes off into the night. And then the next cut, they cut to a scene of him walking down the street, and just the music, this ominous type music that kind of accompanies him as he's kind of aggressively almost power walking down the street into the city night to go find something to get into, and he's like chomping away on a candy bar and all this stuff. The way I'm describing it probably doesn't sound special at all, the way I'm describing this scene, but with the music and everything, to me it was a really cool scene, and this scene kind of showed and illustrated his descent into madness that he was about to take this particular moment, just the musical score that went with it, and he eventually finds a bar, and I won't spoil what happens in the bar, but he goes in this bar and eventually gets into an arm wrestling competition with a guy, and he wins it very emphatically. So I'll just leave it at that. But anyways, 8 out of 10 for The Fly. Check this out for sure. This is a classic film, straight up. This is a classic. In terms of body horror, if you're a fan of body horror, this is a must watch. In fact, if you're a fan of body horror, you've probably already seen this movie, because this is almost like the epitome of a body horror film. I can't imagine somebody being a fan of body horror and not having seen this movie before. Like, it almost doesn't make any sense to me. So 8 out of 10 for The Fly. Definitely check it out. Sci-fi horror to the fullest. It is kind of a tragic story. I will say that for sure, without just like giving away a whole lot, but it is a tragic story, and it's one of those stories where you could argue there's only really one way for it to end once you start to see everything that starts to happen. And yeah, it's a tough it's a tough situation for Seth Brundle to be in. You know what I mean? But I also will say this. I'll point this out. The Fly, when he decides to put himself into that teleportation machine, and then the Fly gets in there, this was such a critical situation where if he had just waited, like if he had just said, nah, let me not do this tonight, let me try it in a week or something, because he makes this decision to test it out on himself. He makes this decision very during an emotional situation. He's angry about something, possibly a little jealous about something. And if he hadn't been in that state of mind, and he had been drinking, if he hadn't been in that state of mind, he probably would have thought better about putting himself into the device at that moment, or at the very least, he would have checked the device more thoroughly to make sure nothing was in it, if he had been in a different state of mind. So for me, it's almost beyond other, along with a lot of other things, it's a little bit of a cautionary tale about checking your emotions and double checking things, being cautious and not letting emotion and anger and jealousy influence you to make actually serious decisions and things like that. That's what it kind of meant to me on this second viewing. I don't necessarily know that's what the filmmakers wanted, but on the second viewing of this movie, that's what really stuck out to me when I really looked at where it started. Because a lot of these horrible situations, especially the older I get, I start to try to pinpoint where things went bad, where the mistake was made, where, like, if this person had never did this, none of this other stuff would have happened. And I find myself trying to find those, pinpoint those moments in these type of horrific films, and that's what hurt him in this movie. Is he made a decision under the influence of alcohol and under the influence of anger and jealousy, and you just can't do that, man. You just can't do that. So, anyways, that's it. 8 out of 10 for this film, The Fly. The 1986 movie, this is the one for me. I haven't even seen the one from the 50s and 60s, and there's no part of me that thinks the one from the 50s and 60s can compete with this one. I almost refuse to believe it. Maybe eventually I'll give it a chance, but it's going to be hard for that movie. It would be hard for that movie to top this one. So go ahead, check this one out. A really good horror season watch. All right, you guys. Thank you for watching. And of course, as always, until the next time, I will catch you on the next one.